It is August 23, 1929. Arabs riot. 133 Jews are killed. Hebron's Jewish community is massacred. Less than 2 weeks have passed since Dr. Chaim Weizmann enjoyed a great triumph. The World Zionist Congress overwhelmingly approved his plan for an expanded Jewish agency to include wealthy non-Zionists. In October, there's another blow. The Wall Street crash and subsequent Great Depression end his hopes that these well-to-do Jews will bring in vastly greater resources to develop Palestine. Over the next decade, Weizmann will see his Zionist dream crumble and his leadership challenged as never before. The British send a royal commission to study the causes of the violence. The outcome is the Passfield White Paper of 1930. It calls for severely limiting Jewish immigration and restricting land sales to Jews. Although by the next Zionist Congress in 1931, Weizmann can point out that the British government has essentially buried the Passfield White Paper, he's subject to a tidal wave of criticism for his accommodating policy toward the British. Weizmann fatally weakens his position in an interview with a Jewish telegraphic agency.
I have no sympathy or understanding for the demand for a Jewish majority. The world will construe this demand only in the sense that we want to acquire a majority in order to drive out the Arabs.
The interview seals Weizmann's fate as head of the World Zionist Organization. Weizmann biographer Norman Rose writes,
"By 123 votes to 106, Labor and a sprinkling of general Zionists remaining faithful, the motion of censure, in fact a vote of non-confidence, was passed. At this dramatic moment, Weizmann sat on the platform like a Buddha, his face frozen."
Weizmann describes his feelings behind the mask.
"I am completely broken, with a grave wound and a gaping emptiness in my heart."
But contrary to Weizmann's own expectations, the Zionist Congress does not select in his place his chief rival, the charismatic Vladimir Jabotinsky. The two men are a study in contrasts. Weizmann refuses to oppose the British openly, believing nothing can be achieved in the absence of friendly relations. Jabotinsky argues this leads the British to believe the Zionists will swallow anything. He urges an international political offensive to pressure the British to fulfill Zionist demands. Instead, the Congress installs Weizmann Lieutenant Nachum Sokolow. One jester compared him to an empty clothes stand, waiting for Weizmann to return to hang his coat on. Weizmann's Zionist career appears to be at an end. After a 14-year hiatus, he turns his attention back to science. He founds the Daniel Seif Institute in Palestine, where he spends much of his time in research. But the rise of Hitler pulls him back to politics. He writes to a friend in November 1933.
"The world is gradually, relentlessly, and effectively being closed to the Jews. And every day I feel more and more that the ring of steel is being forged around us."
In 1935, Weizmann agrees to return as president of both the World Zionist Organization and the Jewish Agency.
Geehrter Kongress, die mir heute Nacht noch zufallen, möchte ich vor allen Dingen
David Ben-Gurion, who leads Mapai, says,
"He is trusted by the British government, and Britain's trust in us is an important condition for our political success."
But while Ben-Gurion and the Laborites may need Weizmann, they do not fully trust him. When Arab riots break out in April 1936, their fears are borne out when he suggests that the Jews should themselves offer to temporarily suspend immigration in order to calm tensions. The Laborites tighten the reins. Norman Rose notes,
For Weizmann, the very idea of anyone daring to supervise his diplomacy was an affront. But the unpalatable fact remained: he was no longer the free agent of happier, bygone days.
Weizmann, however, rises to the occasion in his public speech before the Peel Commission sent by the British to investigate the 1936 riots in Palestine. He describes the central Jewish problem as one of homelessness.
Almost 6 million Jews are doomed to be pent up in places where they are not wanted, and for whom the world is divided into places where they cannot live, and places into which they cannot enter.
When the Peel Commission suggests partitioning Palestine into two states, one Arab and one Jewish, Weizmann is elated. But when the Commission issues its report in July 1937, the proposed area is smaller than Weizmann's minimum requirements. The report also calls for curtailing Jewish immigration. This is hardly full sovereignty. When he is denied an advance copy of the report, Weizmann sends a bitter letter to Colonial Secretary William Ormsby Gore, in which he pours out his decades of frustration.
I have borne most things in silence. I have defended the British administration before my own people, often against my own better knowledge and almost invariably to my own detriment. Why did I do so? Because to me, close cooperation with Great Britain was the cornerstone of our policy in Palestine. But this cooperation remained unilateral. It was unrequited love.
With Europe sliding toward war, the British government fears doing anything that might antagonize Muslims. The Zionists are to pay the price, culminating in the White Paper of 1939. With this instrument, the British intend to put an end to the Jewish national home. At the Zionist Congress in Zurich in 1937, Weizmann gives a famous speech. Well received at the time, it is later much criticized as the full tragedy of the Holocaust becomes known, making Weizmann appear callous. He says,
"The old will pass. They will bear their fate, or they will not. They are dust, economic and moral dust in a cruel world. 2 millions, and perhaps less. She'erit haplita. Only a remnant shall survive. We have to accept it."
In 1939, at the 21st Zionist Congress in Geneva, Weizmann bids farewell to the delegates.
There is a darkness all around us, and we cannot see through the clouds. It is with a heavy heart that I take my leave. We shall meet again in common labor for our land and people. There are some things which cannot fail to come to pass, things without which the world cannot be imagined. The remnant shall work on, fight on, live on until the dawn of better days. Towards that dawn I greet you.
World War II breaks out a week later.